New York's classic rock, Q1043.
Good morning to a woman who is holding one challenging job these days. She is the new president and CEO of Mental Health America, Schroeder Stribling. Welcome to the job. When did this all happen? It was recent, right?
Thank you so much, Shelli, and thank you for having me. Yes, it was all very recent. I have been with Mental Health America for a full month now. And I came after most recently being the CEO of N Street Village, which is a nonprofit in Washington, D.C., providing housing and supportive services to women experiencing homelessness.
Okay, what are the biggest challenges now for Mental Health America? I thought I'd be saying by now we're coming out of the pandemic, but we are not. So we're still dealing with that. We're dealing with an opioid crisis that's just getting worse. We're dealing with people struggling in the economy, worrying if they're going to be evicted, or those who own buildings worrying if they'll even be able to, stay in business.
Right, right. Well, this really is the mental health moment for America, as far as I'm concerned. And all of our large affiliate network across the country knows that this is a moment when we must respond to the urgent needs of the population at large. Clearly, all of the pre-existing conditions that we had, some of which you're referring to in our country, both health-wise and from a social perspective, made us more vulnerable to this pandemic. So not just individual pre-existing conditions like diabetes or asthma that were making people more vulnerable from a health perspective, but also our pre-existing conditions of inequity and social unrest and institutional racism, et cetera. Those things really the pandemic was like an X-ray of our vulnerabilities, and it has a great deal of bearing on our mental health and well-being. And those people who are on the margins and have been on the margins are even more vulnerable from a mental health perspective to the effects of this pandemic, which, as you say, affected us all. So we're coming out of a very, very difficult time when so many people have experienced themselves very directly the effects of this pandemic, whether that's isolation and loneliness, depression and anxiety, all of which we know went up this year, substance use issues, the opioid crisis. As we know, we had a dramatic rise in overdose deaths this past year. All of these things are critical issues for us to face. Where I find hope in this moment is that we have had so many public figures willing to speak out about mental health, starting what seems like now a long time ago in the pandemic with Michelle Obama saying that she was experiencing mild depression, all the way now through to Oprah Winfrey's series, where she talked with public figures and others about mental health issues, and to the athletes that we're seeing, Naomi Osaka and Simone Biles, really bravely, courageously pointing out the need to prioritize our mental health as part of our health.
Yeah, I was just going to say that what is encouraging here is that the conversation on mental health is out there. Now, explain, there are so many people who are confused when it comes to the athletes and their mental health. I mean, Simone Biles basically not participating in most of the Olympics when her whole life, this is one of those moments she's been training for. And this is the first time that I can remember with both Naomi Osaka and Simone Biles coming forward that any athlete has discussed this. So explain from your perspective, what it is they're dealing with and how the public can understand that.
Yes. Well, I think the athletes are both unique in a certain way and also common in another way, and they're helping us with the everyday conversation as well as that is unique to athletes. I mean, any of us can imagine that if you've trained for years for a specific competition or event and you're on the world stage, and as Simone said, she said she felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. And we know so many people as they walk into these events will form opinions of them from just this single moment for which they've been preparing for years. So the stress of that type of moment for any of us would be extreme. And we associate athletes with having a very high degree of awareness about their fitness. And what I particularly applaud in what the athletes are doing is acknowledging that a central part of their fitness is their mental well-being, and that for them to have also a high degree of awareness about where their mental well-being is in the moment and whether they are fully prepared to participate in such a high pressure event without risking greater injury, because that's one of the risks, of course, for them going in if they're not feeling fully fit, including mentally. I think that they have pointed out the importance of prioritizing mental health and been very courageous in saying that they needed to step back at those particular moments and allowing that to be public and discussing it publicly. I think that's a gift to all of us in the same sense that those other public figures raising awareness about mental health has been.
I am speaking with the new president and CEO of Mental Health America, Schroeder Stribling. Let's talk about the pandemic. Let's talk, first of all, about children, because here we have children who I remember their lives are basically short.
Yeah.
Someone who's an adult, most of your life, you have not been living in a pandemic where you're worrying about a virus. For some of these children, a good percentage of their life is taken up worrying about, first of all, getting physically sick, also being away from their friends and away from school. At what point does a parent know what are the warning signs to look out for that their child needs help and that this won't be overcome when school starts in the fall?
Right. Well, I think you're right on track with certainly where we are at Mental Health America, thinking a lot about youth and the impact of youth. We know from our own data and from our screening program, which we have a free online screening program at Mental Health America, mhanational.org. We know from our own data that rates of depression, anxiety, suicidal thinking increased, and especially in the youth population and especially among girls age 11 to 17 over this past year. So there's no doubt that this pandemic has had a unique and troubling effect on our youth, and especially our disadvantaged and marginalized youth as well. In addition to all the stressors that you mentioned, isolation from friends, youth are fearful in a way. They don't have the adult capacity to understand what's going on in the same way that we do. And it can seem so catastrophic and all-consuming to them. And they may be worried also about their parents' well-being, and their parents' mental health could be suffering during this time. So youth have had an awful lot to worry about. When should parents be worried? I think when you see behaviors or you hear commentary from your children that strikes you as troubling or that is different than the norm. Now, that's difficult to assess in children because, of course, they're changing all the time, as they should be, as they grow up and as they try to separate from their parents. However, I think there are some distinct identifying moments that parents can look for. Certainly any excessive isolation or extreme changes in mood or behavior or commentary about any comments about suicide or low self-esteem that seem particularly unusual for your child. I think those are really the things that parents want to look out for, and then want to think about when is the right time to seek help for a child, hopefully with the child's participation. We're also very hopeful that schools will get well prepared to address the mental health needs of children as they return to school this fall. And we just put out a report at Mental Health America 2 weeks ago about school preparedness and the things that schools can do to be ready to meet the mental health needs of students who are returning.
Very briefly, what can people do day to day to alleviate the stress in their lives on a day-to-day basis? What changes can they make that will have a beneficial impact?
Great question. And I think the first thing that we all need to do is to be self-aware, to know what our signs are for when we're in any kind of mental health distress. That might include changes in appetite or sleep or mood or physical symptoms, stomach aches and headaches and things like that. So to be aware, first of all, that you might be affected by stress. And I think altogether, to the extent that we can advance that we can destigmatize these things for ourselves, to not judge ourselves or shame ourselves or expect ourselves to power through, so to speak, but to acknowledge that these are significant and real issues if we are in mental health distress.
So what can we do on a day-to-day basis to alleviate that, to make it better?
For one thing, if you find yourself in that circumstance, then know what type of help it is that you need. Do you need to simply take a sick day, a mental health day? That can be one very important small intervention, or maybe you need to take more time than that if you're able to. And again, here we have concern for workers who don't have that kind of flexibility built into their job structure. That's one thing that you can do. Additionally, you can seek help or counseling. And we are fortunate, especially in the New York, New Jersey area, there are more than 30 affiliates of Mental Health America. You can reach out to any one of those to find someone for counseling or assistance if you find that you need that extra support during a difficult time.
Speaking of which, Mental Health Association of Monmouth County, I want to remind you that their golf classic and cocktail party is coming up tomorrow at Beacon Hill Country Club in beautiful Atlantic Highlands, and you have a role in this event tomorrow as well.
Yes, I'm so excited to join MHA of Monmouth County tomorrow at their golf classic, and I will be there for their evening reception and dinner, and I'm just delighted they are an extraordinary affiliate providing very important mental health services in the region.
I remember talking with Wendy DePedro after Superstorm Sandy, and providing, I mean, people were so stressed out and, still recovering out of their homes. And then, of course, came the pandemic. And it's, you can get help, you can reach out, but this is a wonderful fundraising event. Again, it is the Golf Classic and Cocktail Party coming up tomorrow, Mental Health Association of Monmouth County, Beacon Hill Country Club in Atlantic Highlands. If you missed any part of this conversation, this lives on my podcast, Sonstein Sessions. You download the iHeartRadio app, which is free, and then just check out Sonstein Sessions. And also, speaking of mental health, you may want to check out my 9/11 Stories podcast and video series. And this is people from all walks of life, from first responders to widows, to students, to office workers, what they endured on September 11th, how they survived their whole day, start to finish, and what has happened since.
Yeah.
because 9/11 didn't end on 9/11. So thank you so much, and congratulations to you on your new position, Schroeder Stribling. And I will see you guys tomorrow morning on the Jim Kerr Rock and Roll Morning Show, Q104.3.
Thank you, Shelli.
New York's classic rock, Q1043.